We're going to be starting the debate very quickly. We already got your speaker orders, so just a quick reminder for everyone that one, since this debate is going to be recorded, please be very, very mindful with the words that you choose or the case that you present during the debate, because everything will be documented and would possibly be streamed. So just be extra careful with equity and to not make any unbased argumentations, and just to be very careful to not breach any equity violations. Second thing is, make sure that you have a timer to not exceed the given time, 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Right after that, the judges is not going to note anything down. With that being said, introducing the panels first. Hello everyone, my name is Rachel, chairing this round. Good luck for everyone.
Hello everyone, my name is Abby. Good luck everyone.
My name is Zainal, and good luck.
Hello, my name is Fikri, so I wish you good luck.
Hi, my name is Afifa. Good luck.
With that being said, opening the debate from OG, we welcome Prime Minister to start the speech. Here.
Check. The mass acquisition is a blatant abuse of power by these big AI companies, which will seek to concentration the market share that exists within them to impact the balance of the competition and the access of data into mass companies. This is why, under opening government, we will oppose this motion. But a few points of setup. How is this mass acquisition going? It is by buying the smaller companies, right? Which we just assume that these bigger companies will give fair amounts of money to the smaller companies so that they are willing to sell them. And insofar as the current regulation is right now, there is no point of regulation that could stop them. That is why it will only continue to grow into bigger market share for these bigger companies. But how does opening government will oppose this? We'll oppose it by campaigning against it and encourage for all the smaller companies to not sell up to the bigger companies. But moving on to the case, why specifically this policy must be opposed? Exactly because it is something that is bad for the market competition to begin with. Smaller companies, smaller AI companies exist to fulfill an important niche within the workforce in of itself. It can be photo and video generator, such as Zora, for example, which are bought by OpenAI, or meeting scheduler and all of that. They can generate profit while at the same time fulfill the market needs to begin with. This way, big competition, if they want to get bigger market share, they have to check and balance. They have to innovate to create new technologies and thus advancing the technology of AI to begin with. But this exactly simply will not happen with mass acquisition. Why? Because these bigger companies can easily acquire, therefore reduces the need for them to innovate on creating new developments within the AI technologies, compounded by the lack of competition within these specific niche, specific sectors will keep the field stagnant to begin with. This is likely to happen exactly because they have the limited resources and they would choose to compete with big companies to maximize resources to compete with other bigger companies, such as creating better search engine and whatnot. This will create a bad impact for the consumer, both existing ones and also consumer in the future who are going to need these new technologies to innovate and to grow as the time passes. This is important because AI on print by these bigger companies. More company acquisition, meaning that there is going to be more data being concentrated by these bigger companies. Why is this bad? 3 reasons. Firstly, by selling metadata to the consumer. I know this already happened in status quo, but exactly with more data, you will create much bigger value, and with more data, there is more of a hassle for them to ask for consent, to ask for permission from the users and the data who it belongs to. This is important because the selling of the data will happen without the consent, even worse under the opposition bench compared to the status quo. Secondly, it will create a unfair bargaining power against the government, where there would be much lesser likelihood for there is going to be regulations in the future. Because, for 3 reasons. Firstly, because the governments are reliant on the data that these companies are providing in order to do targeted campaigns. Secondly, these companies are able to easily shift public opinion, since Google also control other services such as and so does Amazon, so does Microsoft. Thirdly, there is going to be more people relying on AI to get the answer to begin with. We already seen this, for example, in minor scale in New York, where if you search Zohran Mamdani right now, you are most likely going to see bad news and negative news about him, exactly because he is seeking to regulate these industries, seeking to tax the rich, and therefore the companies retaliate by making a bad public image on them. This is important because these companies can easily shift public opinion without the counterbalance, without the check and balance, unlike with governments, for example, where you can do elections to unseat them. Thirdly, the risk of data breach, where there is more metadata, there is more resources to keep them. This is therefore there is bigger likelihood for data breach, exactly because the incentive of company to maximize profit compounded by the mass acquisition. Therefore, they have to lower their spending. They have to make sure that they still able to gain profit, and exactly because the lack of regulation and check and balance in status quo, it is much easier to implement these austerity measures in this sector. So the way is simple. The issues that are existing in status quo will be compounded and be 10 times worse under the opposition bench, where the companies have ultimate control on the government, where it does not exist in status quo. Before I move on, closing. Well, because at the very least, there is going to be spread of data, there is going to be competition. This venture capitalist encourages competition, the acquisition will discourage one. Lastly, on the AI bubble, the bigger companies get, therefore, they are able to they are going to require bigger data centers where you have to host the servers in these big buildings, where it is going to be very much taking away on the resources in of itself. This is bad because it will create bubble while the value keeps increasing and in the status quo, and it will make it likelier to burst in the future. How is this going to happen? Because there is going to be limited source of energy and other resources. You cannot create infinite electricity. You cannot create infinite water. And it is something that is finite to begin with and something that cannot be controlled to begin with. The bigger these data centers are, the more likely it is to consume more electricity, more water, threatening the environment, and it will likely reach the breaking point as predicted by experts like Gita Wirjawan, for example, where electricity cannot keep up with AI. And the moment this happens, the market will likelier to burst and create a substantial negative impact to the general economies to begin with. The comparative under the government badge is that insofar as you keep these companies smaller and exist, they are able to divide into smaller data centers, not taking as much environmental impact and electricity, and more likely to do data sharing between smaller companies. For all these reasons, proud to propose.
We thank you for that speech. To open up opening opposition's case, let's welcome LO.
Okay. Check. Okay. Everything that I said does not represent who I am. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We do not understand what happened under OG, because if OG were going to talk about political weapon, this will happen anyway, because the use of political weapon the use of technology for political weapon has been done since 2010, for example. The use of how media can be used as a political weapon in Indonesia, for example, is happening anyway. But how you tackle this is not by regulating certain amount of company that are allowed to be dominated by bigger company. You tackle this by actually telling society to better pick and choose where are they getting their news from, for example. This is why you have certain amount of lessons on menghindari hoax in SMP, for example. We say that this is better things that happen under any time, and without even actually limiting the idea of company that are going to be developed into even more and actually bringing benefit to the society. If OG we're going to talk about green energy, we say it's a dead end in both point, because green energy or the idea of pollution will still exist under our side, even if there are smaller data center anyway. The smaller data center still need water anyway, ladies and gentlemen, and they have the capabilities to become big, and you need those kind of many water to begin with. So we say it's a dead end anyway. We say under our side, innovations could happen for data centers that didn't even need water, for example. We said that this happened under oppositions because you are allowed this kind of giant company to cater more capable innovators who are able to come up with the right ideas, who come up with a brilliant idea. We said the idea of innovations will heavily improve under our side, because now that this kind of company have resource and they have smart people anyway. So you will see within the 5 years, you will have like green AI, for examples. But there are several framing that will be important under this debate is actually how AI market look like. Because we don't think that it is explained enough. We believe that the use of AI have been something that very flexible. Possibly every sector you can imagine can be influenced with AI. That's why you see a new type of AI every day. AI that could make videos, AI that could detect the type of microplastic in water, for example. AI can be everything that you can imagine of. This creates one unique thing about any other market, AI market, incomparable to any other market. It does not get it does not get any harm from dominations. Dominations and other things are become bad because in certain market, it is so rigid to actually go opt-in into the market anyway. But the nature market of AI is that it is very flexible. It can be new every single day. Even though now you have like AI to control the water, now you need another people to actually maximizing those kind of AI and innovation. This shows you that the demand or constant demand of AI are actually exist within the society that's so big that it is not getting harmed even by domination itself, ladies and gentlemen. Dominations could Domination or monopolies could be actually harmful for the rigid type of market, for example, market in food, for example, market in like shampoos, for example. That's very rigid. So that's why you don't see the new investors coming in. But in comparison to AI, even though GPT is already there and established anyway, you see a lot of kind of AI that go up into different market or different type of AI. You see those kind of things every day. We say that other than those kind of demand that exists with an AI, we say that the reasons why AI are very prone, even the dominations happen, are because the existing investors that coming. This is important. There are a lot of investors. We say that but there are a lot of angel investors, for example. You see this in films like Startup, for example, in South Korean film, for example. These kind of angel investors are those who actually more opt-in into new companies to begin with. There exist in status quo. So we say any other things that OGs is concerning will still this kind of smaller company will still going to get any impact from any impact and or any resource because that there is an angel investor anyway. But OO will prove to you why then acquiring certain company are in line within the interest of investor, and why then it will bring a good things. First, what is actually investors want? We say that an inventor, I mean the one who create things. What do they want? We believe that they want profit, they want resource, they want investment money, and also but we believe that any start of point, the people that invent something want to be recognized by people. At any point, you come and you want to be like the best inventor of AI anyway. We say that how you achieve these things are much more better if you are contingent yourself into Google, for example, because now you already have the halo effect of Google. People will know you anyway, for example. We say that it is not stop until that. Comparatively speaking, if you are a new investor, people will still look at you anyway. And the idea of money, for example, profit, for example, it is much more harder for you to do investment on AI or to create new AI because it is expensive in terms of money. The technology that you need is very expensive. So we say, as an inventor, I would rather to hang myself with Google anyway because I have their money and I can do what kind of things that I would like to explore. Point.
Yeah, if you maintain the control of the company, you are the CEO and founder. But if you get acquired, you are going to be another Google employee. How is this recognition?
Even though I am another Google employee, but the idea that the idea that me and my invention are worldwide is something that we want to achieve as an the one who invents something. For example, we say that at any point, what you want as an inventor is to break even from the point where you get to maximize profit. For example, this company will not buy your idea with very small amount of money. They will buy your idea with higher amount of money. For example, but talking about why then, in our side, centralized power to monopoly is actually better. First, we're talking about better regulations. When you talk about AI, you will not only talk about how the data and technology, we talk about something that's close to the society. We believe as the times goes on, the development of AI carry two different impact into two different markets. For examples, in country that have cyber regulations, logically speaking, it is easier for you to control some giant company because you can put a lot of power into them because you have the market anyway. Then they need those kind of money to begin with, so they are likely to bow down to you. Second, in country that didn't have cyber law, for example, we say that the idea of controlling one giant entities are more comparable to, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, as an investor, it is much more easier for you to actually opt into Google, for example, because they will actually taking care of any regulations that you need to fulfill before your investment even come up. For example, under our side, regulations and innovations will still exist. Proud to oppose.
All right, we thank you for that speech. To continue OG's case, let's welcome DPM.
Okay. Check, is this loud enough? Okay. Okay. So, yeah. I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. The first thing that I'll do as opening government is to deal with opposition's mitigations to say that but bigger AI developers have no incentive to commercialize your data, or it is easier for us to check and balance bigger companies because everything is concentrated on those individuals. The first response is to say that there is a difference between persecuting company that did data privacy infringements and executing antitrust law, as what Jason explained. Because the purpose of executing antitrust law is to say that no matter how good companies are, if you let them have power and become much more dominant, there is a higher possibility for them to be evil. That's why in some states like USA, it is impossible for aircraft and domestic plane companies to be controlled by one entity or big corporations, the same as big tech companies that were forbidden to sell their stocks from one another. Our burden as opening government is not to prove why the companies in some circumstances or in most circumstances are likely to be proven guilty, because some individuals explain, because opening oppositions themselves explain that companies, especially AI, had the ability to become extremely powerful. In order for you to formulate antitrust law, you do not really need to prove companies are guilty. What you need to prove is that some people are scared and insecure where their data is going to be used, and that alone isn't enough justifications. Because AI had data of every single behavior of humans, starting from your behavior of cheating during exams, your relationship, and etc. So there is a higher possibility they will capitalize this for any other purposes, whether it's monetary purpose or whether it's political purpose. If their regulation works, there will be no things such as Cambridge Analytica scandal that caused skepticism on people behavior. That shows that data protection bills are not perfectly functionized. Even when smallest behavior shows when Google sold the data to e-commerce such as Peribenka, when it constantly feeds you things such as luxury bags that you love in the first page of your screen, that shows that people are kind of skeptical and afraid where their data is going to be used. This is where government or state need to step in to remove the feeling of insecurity that people feel on their data. Because oppositions cannot tell that people will not use AI, because even oppositions conceded to some extent that even smallest form in this world requires AI, such as shorting your FYP on TikTok, shorted by AI and algorithm. Because people have no options to opt out from AI influence, even if they wanted to. So the best thing that we can do in open government is to reduce the skeptical feeling that people feel by not letting the companies become much more too powerful. Otherwise, people would lose trust to incumbent government, or the people would sue companies again and again that created massive financial loss to companies. So since this is a this house opposed motions, so once more, you do not see this debate only from the state or company's perspective, but you see this debate from the general individuals. And insofar, if we have proven that the users are becoming the individuals that were impacted the most by this policy or by this behavior, then we ought to win in our side of the house. But in order for us to able to win in both exchange on innovation, I will co-opt this with skepticism. I think even in other scenarios where people are unwilling to give their data or interact with AI, assuming that they have options, then this is exactly what happened on their side of the house. People are becoming even more skeptical or afraid. They would just use manual workforce, such as using Microsoft Workspace, that discourages the usage of AI and innovation later. So this makes AI cannot learn properly, that will create stagnant developments that harm companies' income. Because you are likely to have bad AI that prone to things such as misidentification, unsorted contents, and filter that harm user experiences altogether. To this, the responses that coming from both opening oppositions and POI coming from COS, the problem still exists in our side on data infringement. Well, in order for you to prevent the more problems to come on, or the higher problems to appear, you need a much more comprehensive development of antitrust law that only happen in our side of the house. Because we consider people are vulnerable on AI and technological companies, therefore we must oppose that possibility to appear. Closing.
I still don't get why having 4 big AI companies under your side doesn't mean they can also lobby the government.
So if that's the case, then sure, in either side of the house, they would lobby the government, but they become much more powerful on your side when they had every single data of users managed by small AI companies that exist on your side. The debate, therefore, cannot be win on exclusivity, but it is on the degree of harms that happen because the same problems happen on both sides. CEO said, you can get the capital anyway from things such as venture capitals when you develop startup. That entails you do not need acquisitions, guys. Therefore, opposition's bench is quite backlashing over one another. Because what's the difference between the investment done by acquisitions and the investment injected by venture capital? Venture capital will not ask about consumer data because they don't really care. As long as your company profit and as long as your company perform in any meaningful way, we can achieve something that matters in our side of the house. Opening oppositions therefore said, but the existence of bigger companies such as Google help you to gain much more investment. But this is still uncertain whether Google will allocate the amounts of budget that they got to smaller companies owned by you as an individual, because the protections policy that came from opening opposition's case is still contingent on two big questions: whether you want to execute this policy to protect small companies or whether you want to execute this policy for innovations. If you want to execute this policy for protect small companies, this is exactly what happened in our side of the house by not allowing bigger companies to acquire these small companies. But if you want to if you want to execute the protections regulations for the sake of innovation, the innovation, therefore, contingent on the people's skepticism. If the people do not want to use AI because some companies might be too powerful and they are afraid whether their data is going to be used for another purpose, then that's the main reasons why opening oppositions cannot win the exchange, because it's contingent on people's skepticism. Lastly, a bit on innovations. I think if you talk about the innovations then, quickly, I want to seal the deal, because op idea saying that you deserve to acquire the market because technology sectors are the kind of sectors that improve on innovations. Untrue. We all probably see that tech companies are using AI right now. Even like the smallest companies such as TradingView actually utilize the opportunity to have AI to search the preferable stock market in the status quo right now to give recommendations. So because the prototype of language model has been existed in the status quo, you do not really need to depend on bigger companies to perpetuate your innovations by doing much more expensive research and development. The second thing is to say that their side also acknowledges that small companies usually bring much more unique innovations. And if the small companies bring much more unique innovations, then the best thing is to let the small companies develop by themselves. The capital can be gone and invested by venture capital or any investment that opening oppositions kind of conceded to, because AI is one of the most potential sector. Therefore, it's not really hard for you to attract investment, especially if the innovation given from your technology or companies is kind of unique, such as the Samsung AI that develop personalized experiences using phone without any physical gesture. You can still gain investment even much bigger than the Google, because these are the innovations that never existed before. So what does this mean is that if the innovations can be done all alone by small companies, which we have proven in opening government, there is no need for you to do acquisitions. I propose.
All right, we thank you for that speech. To continue OO's case, let's welcome DLO. Directly continue with opening opposition's case, welcoming DLO.
Is this loud enough? Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This is debate about technology. The ultimate benefit of this debate should be about the innovation, how the innovation should go better under any side of the house. We don't understand why the case of government is strictly saying that, okay, this is going to be harmful for everyone. This is going to be, massive data selling and everything. But innovation will fall better if we have more resources. More resources are needed in AI development because we need money and we need data. It is operated into that situation. Even there is an angel investors, also venture capitals and etc. We think that competition is still there. It is still enough that will create innovations. That's being said. A few responses towards opening government. Number one, they say, okay, that there are now a massive abuse. There are now concentrated business because now the bigger company is getting bigger widely. First, demands are getting out of hand. In every sectors of our life, we use AI. Even me, curhat to AI, ladies and gentlemen. Second, even people concerned now not on who actually produced that, but what are the innovations. They are demanding for more innovations, such as like how AI is going to be more understanding towards you. They are demanding into that. So that's why we don't think that innovations will fall better under opening government. Second, under the idea of how smaller company exists for more niche market. Prerequisite of this is that your product is need to be accessible for everyone. If you are going to more niche market, you need to provide the accessibility on this. The uniqueness of AI market, it needs complementary. It needs more data. That's why the bigger company is the only actor who can provide this, since they are already running bigger and bigger. Thirdly, about the idea of competition. We think that even so that opening government say that the competition is not an ideal under oppositions under the house, we think that under them it is going to be harder to actually enter. If they actually want to compete, the market is already hard to enter because you need more resources to begin with. That's why if the market is already hard to enter, it is going to be better if you as a smaller AI companies being acquired by these bigger companies. What startup and smaller company actually wants, they never actually analyze on that, because this startup and smaller companies, they want profit and they want faster innovation, since they need more resource available for them. Fourth, lesser consumers protections. They say that, okay, there will be now less consumers protections. But since that more people actually want this, now that your product is going to be more accessible for everyone, law are made based on demand. When more actors are going to be competing on your side, now that government has the incentive to actually create law on that, because government see the potential of this big company is growing in your country. Of course, they have the incentive on making law, since there is now domination with, let me finish. Fifth, they say that, okay, there is now massive data selling, it is bad for consumer and everything. We think that, okay, let's bite this bullet. We say that if you are saying that this big company is evil, well, they are the easiest target for you to actually evilize. When there is a mismanagement of data, you are going to easily target them. You ask them for accountability because they are big, they have the name, you can easily calling them out in social media, for example. If you are going to target the smaller company, they have no name, who is going to support you on your case? Now going to the scenario comparative. No. Number one, how the innovation is going to look like under opening opposition. A, how ideal innovation should look like. First, what are the incentives? First, market projection, and second, resource availability. These are two conditions where innovations could only happen, because now researchers are now exposed and endorsed to direct consumers, because now they have the actually channel to give their product, to give their innovations towards the consumers, because most often than not, they are not directly engaging towards the consumers, because they have no access towards it, right? Yes, it is going to be controlled like how opening government said. However, check and balance exists. How? More research is there. The technology is already offered and marketed well by the big company. More consumers are existing. If OG wants consumers protection, exactly this is what will help better under that, because now the big investors are there. They are more experienced. They know how to handle when the time of crisis actually happen. Second, how people actually react to this. What consumers want? They want more access to product, they want better quality, and they want protection. We think that if you are as a consumers, it is easier and it is more valued if Google offer you a product rather than just antah berantah researchers anyway. So that's why if you are as a consumers, you want better quality, you are going to vote and value more from this Google. That's
Point.
why second, what researchers want. What researchers want, they want more exposure towards the consumers. They want actually the research are provided because they want to keep exploring the idea of AI technology and etc. Lastly, they also want protection. They are also afraid if they are being called out by consumers when their innovation actually wrong. So that's why they need this big company to actually be a backup for them. Thirdly, what this company wants, they want more explorability. They want to touch more market. It can be done by allowing more research to actually happen under us. What are the crystallization of this? We want more innovation. It is clear under opening opposition because this is the only mechanization that will encourage research. No, encouraging research is the best interest of all these companies that is currently working on AI, because now if you are as a scientist, you are going to be encouraged more because now you are going to be exposed towards the resource availability that is being had by this bigger company. Now there are more quality advancements that because this big company actually has nothing to lose because they have enough resources, so that's why they can keep offering you for money and resources and also the data that you actually need for your innovation. Now, second, about more innovation. Current demand of AI is actually getting out of hand. There are more people that actually want to use AI because we need this in every sectors of our life. Now that the type of innovations that is going to be existing is that now there is going to be more humanized because now you have more resources towards that because the data is going to be massively spread under this big company, right? You are as a consumers is going to be understood better. You are having a better AI under our side of house. Thirdly, about the hope, we think that this is the ultimate reason why opening opposition is going to win because now the resources are there. The researchers are going to often innovate, but they have no money. Now the projection of the future research is going to be more available because the access of resources is enough. You are going to be more productive now that more actors is going to be there. Also, if you are going to actually market your product, there are more market attractiveness because now you are going to have a better quality since you have more resources to begin with. Lastly, about the collaboration. If opening government wants about the competition and etc., we think that the best way of you to achieving innovations and development of AI, we think we need more collaboration because now there is an incentive of the bigger actor and also smaller actor to actually collaborate into making a better innovation. They can now better explore and everything. Since now like a lot of stigmas unethical is happening, the bigger company can actually keep the controllability on that, and also the smaller company can actually keep innovating, making sure that everything is innovated well. Proud to oppose.
All right, we thank you for the speech. Just a gentle reminder for all of the debaters, POIs are highly encouraged. Please do take and offer at least one POI just to make sure that all of the points are going to be engaged well. With that being said, let's start the back end of the debate, welcoming member of government to start the speech.
I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. If opening opposition wants innovations in types of AI, this will not happen to several characteristics of the company that have inherently natures of capitalism, right? But I will integrate later to my argument. But why does both opening benches could not proceed in this debate? Because due to the fact that it's not something that is more likely and have bigger impact toward the society and toward the development of the technology of AI, right? Closing government will prove to you several things. Why at the end of the day, innovation will more likely to exist when we oppose the acquisitions of the smaller AI companies, and why at the end of the day, the segmentations of AI industry is something that is better in our side. Okay. But let's come to the contextualizations. How does the 4 major companies actually looks like, right? We need to actually take a look that the 4 major companies have more inherent drives to the acquirement of profit because they have a lot of things at to stake, right? This is take a look at an example that they have a lot of investor to cater to. They have to make to have like the ideology to cater to, because more bigger companies have these certain types of branding and image that they need to fulfill. Means that Google cannot suddenly shift their perception and shift their support towards certain things, because they have branding image and they have and they need to serve accountability toward the citizen as the biggest companies in technology nowadays, right? This is something that they need to take as a stake. So means that at the end of the day, innovations will less likely to happen if you actually enable the idea of acquisition. Why is that so? Because due to the fact that the company will not sacrifice a lot of things to actually cater toward the niche of the the AI industry that exists in the society itself, right? I already characterized to you before how does the four major companies look like. And also, they also have another thing, like they have more standard and social construct to follow. Means that they are prone to be publicly judged and need to maintain their PR. This is something that will eventually negate the idea of innovation coming from opening opposition, when I told you that the researcher will have more available and flexibility to actually create more things in AI. But this is something that will not true, because when a certain companies acquisite your companies, you will not have that much bargaining power to actually create something more, right? Because you need to pass the board and else, and they need to actually consider a lot of other things in the companies, and they need to consider the branding and image that I already characterized to you before, right? So at the end of the day, innovation will not happen in your side of the house. And also when you're talking innovation would happen because they will have more resources. At the end of the day, the innovation will not happen because I told you before again, they need to fulfill certain types of construct, and at the end of the day, it will create a stagnation in the development of the AI itself. And why is this important? Later. Okay, coming to my argument, but why then at the end of the day, closing government will win this debate? Because first we will prove to you why is this something that is very unique to AI, and why the AI itself needs the development proliferations that will never be exist under the side of opposition. Yes, CEO. I think at the end of the day, the small company innovation will be valuable when they have much more flexibility, and they will fulfill the demand of the user that I will integrate later in my argument. Thanks to point that out. Okay, first take a look. Why is something that is very unique to AI, right? We need to actually look like how is this technology of AI something that is very significant. First, because AI is react or developed based on responses. Means that AI are very much dependent on the customer and the market itself, right? Because AI will not be developed enough if you don't have the customer or the user to actually train your AI to become something, right? This is why now GPT are able to actually understand the metrics of the debate, because people taught GPT how to debate, right? This is something that will exist. But how would actually at the end of the day, this certain times of development will not happen if you if you have much only for major companies to have a certain acquisition toward this. Because first, because they will not innovate the AI to cater toward more specific uses, because they need to actually cater toward to more generalized use of the people, because they need to protect a lot of attributes that I already characterized to you before, right? This is something that is bad. Why? Because if there is no certain types of segmentations in the AI, at the end of the day, the AI will only be used for general user, for general use only, and it will not attract much more much more user and the demand of user at the end of the day, right? Because we need to actually look like there are two types of users of the AI. First, the people that use it as an assistive devices, and second, people that use it for the sake of it's pique your curiosity and it's something that is interesting, right? But we need to actually take a look that people that use AI as an assistive device eventually have the limitation and what kind of assistance that you can use the AI, right? This is something that is unwrittenly agreed by a lot of people in the professional place and in the educational place, right? So at the end of the day, when you don't have the segmentations of the market itself, the AI will not develop and will only use and will only cater toward the more general use of the people, because this company will not eventually cater toward the specific use. No. So at the end of the day, we think that development and proliferation will not happen under the side of opposition. And why at comparatively, why at the end of the day, government inside government you will have much more innovation, because first you will not have certain types of company limiting you to become to innovate to innovate something that is strictly based on their ideology and strictly based on their vision, right? This is what it looks like, because every types of user will have different specific uses and different preferences toward the AI. This is the same analogy. If you will use Instagram for specific use, you will use Twitter for specific use, right? There are different types of AI. But what happened if the AI companies are very centralized and polarized toward only 4 types of major companies that actually really need to fulfill the requirement of profit that I already characterized to you, means that innovation will only be stagnant based on how they could actually attract more the general masses and the general people that only use AI as something that is not significant enough, right? Because at the end of the day, we think when we're debating under the motions of innovations of technology, the advancement of technology is what all of the benches need to actually achieve, right? So at the end of the day, so why then? So bottom line to this, what does the thing that CG brought that is significant enough? Because first we show you why it's not likely why is it not likely innovation will not be happen under the idea if there is no segmentations in the market, and why at the end of the day we think we prove to you and in the more foundational level the behavior of the company, and why then at the end of the day segmentation innovation will only be happen inside CG. Proud to propose.
All right, we thank you for that speech. To open up CO's case, let's welcome Member of Opposition.
Like it or not, we are likely not approaching a bubble. We might actually be in one. And the question now is, how do we keep such a bubble stable and prevent it from popping? And the reason that this is important is because the existence of a bubble, or the fear of a bubble, affects the decision making of actors to a much greater degree than simple capitalistic competition. Because when that bubble pops, for instance, not only does their company go down the drain, but the entirety of society goes down with them. We simply cannot allow this bubble to pop, and if acquisition means that that bubble becomes more stable or prevents it from forming, then we are so happy to oppose. I want to first do one point of extraneous rebuttal before I move on to the massive CG extension of why we're able to stall the AI bubble. And this is this big idea from both government sides on how there's massive power from these AI companies. When they acquire, that means they are very difficult to regulate. First note that there is a lack of comparative. Given that the comparative under their side of the house is still a massive oligopoly of companies that not just have AI businesses, but are also tech giants in their own right, means that they have a massive burden to explain why we are able to regulate that better under their side of the house. So this is already a lack of comparative. And I know that OG said that, well, at least we get some marginal benefit. It is unclear to what extent this benefit manifests and why they can necessarily overturn all of the harms that they explain. They simply cannot cop that out. But second, I would note that massive power is symmetric, even if you did manage to break up these massive companies, because there's NVIDIA. All of these AI developers get their chips from somewhere, and the person that supplies the designs for those chips is NVIDIA, who is basically the puppeteer that does all of the shadow stuff to get this AI industry flowing. And they're so powerful to the extent that they're able to lobby the US government against that policy from selling chips to China, simply because they are scared if the bubble pops and if these AI developers are not successful, then their business goes down the drain and they can't make money. Given they also make contracts with foundries, for instance, to make them these chips, they simply cannot lose out on this business venture. That is why this massive power exists on the government, as I can ridiculously explain why they're able to break up NVIDIA. I'll just take that.
So CO said big companies can bread golf. OO said it's easier to hold big company accountable. Irrespective of the backstabbing that CO did with this effort in manual, by the way, the solution is to stop bigger companies getting more powerful.
I don't think it's like generally knifing, given that we are engaging with the comparative that you did when opening opposition was not able to. But in any case, I don't think that's the important part of this debate, because you probably understand that it's rather symmetric. What is important, we think, is the bubble. Let's first give a crash course on what bubbles are and why they happen, especially in the context of AI. Why is there an AI bubble? There are two things to need to consider. Firstly, that there's currently a very massive growth of AI, and this manifests in, for example, constant innovation within that AI scene. We agree that the existence of, for example, greater quality over time, for example, for the offerings of OpenAI, or the diversity of application as explained for these small startups, is very important to maintain the existence of this bubble, because that growth signals to investors that they can invest in this business and that it's going to be something that's profitable for them. Not just retail investors, but also massive investment firms and banks, for instance, who buy into this. But secondly, that this growth is inherently unsustainable, given that, for instance, empirically speaking, OpenAI is running on a loss, and the reason for that is because doing AI is actually really expensive currently, exactly because those databases are expensive, they take up a lot of power, they use a lot of water, you need to buy the chips from NVIDIA, those chips need to get manufactured by TSMC. So there's a lot of losses and a lot of fees associated with the process of developing AI, which means that a lot of these companies actually lose money from their AI ventures, such as OpenAI, for instance. And I think this also applies to smaller companies, such as small VC companies, for instance, whose VC capital can obviously run out at some point. So this is unsustainable growth that we have to address. But I would note one thing that makes this bubble different from other bubbles that we have observed within history, i.e., for example, the housing bubble. And the reason this bubble is different is because there is actually real value within AI. That's to say that AI has many applications in, for example, image generation, in art, or I guess not art, but like, you get what I mean. In, for example, medical applications, in all of these things, and especially in the military context, for instance. That means that there is real value that AI can have to catch up to its expected value. So what we need AI to do is to give companies space and to give governments the space to figure out how exactly are we going to give AI this value, and how can we stall for long enough that this catches up to that expected value, and we're able to stabilize to such a degree that the bubble does not pop. But what happens when the bubble pops? I think one, obviously you don't get any of the benefit of OG with regards to innovation or anything, and to a certain extent also CG, and this also mechanizes OO because the AI companies don't exist. But also secondly, that you probably get an economic recession of gargantuan proportions, given that the AI industry is so incredibly massive that I don't think that government can say that, well, I'll pop it earlier. You can't pop it earlier because I will take the rest of us down with it. We have to find a better solution here. But lastly, I would also note that when the Western market for AI pops, China still has an AI industry, and the implication for that is twofold. One, that companies are obviously scared of the bubble popping. That's why NVIDIA is literally feeding companies money to buy its chips, because it's so damn scared of their business going down the drain. But secondly, that governments are scared, and that's why they're scared to regulate, because they feel that when they regulate, they're going to slow down the market to such an extent that they're going to accidentally pop that bubble, and that's going to take down the rest of the economy with them. But moreover, given that that bubble pops, they can start losing to China within the AI war, which obviously has massive military implications for these countries. So how do we stall or prevent a bubble? Three things. One, that we're able to focus mainly on the mainline products for these big companies, given that they now have all of the attention given to them. That means we can improve the quality of these offerings to such a degree that they can sustain that bubble for investors to believe in. On the comparative, they're wasting money on developing these technologies on their own when they could just acquire a smaller company that has done it already. But second, the startups get more media exposure, which means that it's more like to drive investors into those small startups so that it doesn't just end up becoming wasted money. It becomes a product that people genuinely believe in. And I would note that they always choose the best companies to invest and acquire because of the process of due diligence. All companies look for companies that have promising offerings that are financially sound to a certain extent and that can back up their offerings, for instance. So they're not going to choose scams, they're not going to choose anything, they're going to choose companies that genuinely have good applications, such as, for example, in fintech or in medicine. But three, that you get more stable finances the moment that these smaller companies get acquired by these bigger companies, because now you have the backing for example, Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which prevents those startups from obviously losing their offerings, but also prevents them from going bankrupt and therefore destabilizing the economy and risking a recession from happening. And this is important because, AI is a very expensive industry, as you probably heard from OO. And the weighing, I think, is threefold. One, against OG, what this explains is that the lack of regulation is somehow actually fine and probably rather necessary within our current context. Because when you regulate, especially very aggressively, as OG says, I don't think we can't have any form of regulation. Obviously, we have data regulation laws in the EU, for instance, like GDPR. But when you become too aggressive, as OG probably wants, obviously you risk popping this bubble and you risk bringing everybody down with you. So we say that the lack of regulation now isn't something that just happens because they're evil, but there's also a good rational reason to happen. But second, that we mechanize OO's points on innovation. And especially against CG. I think CG like depends on these oligopolies being stupid and not wanting any innovation. We say that it doesn't matter whether they're stupid or not. We say they're actually pretty smart. And because they're smart, they're really scared of not being able to innovate because that bubble's gonna pop and they're gonna lose their businesses. So they need to do this or they will do this. And thirdly, against the debate, we establish a much greater urgency than some nebulous ideas on innovation and niches or whatever, which I don't think is clear until the end of the debate, and that is why you oppose.
All right, we thank you for that speech. To close up CG's case, let's welcome Government Whip.
Hello, is it good enough? I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Sigi's dancing here is quite accurate. We are the only team to actually try to mechanize on how the innovation will actually happening under our case, and this kind of characterization on how this kind of AI market and the uniqueness of the AI market and how this technological advancement will be likely happen in our case. But several thoughts. First of all, the CEO. The whole case from the CEO itself is already is under the idea of economic bubble and how this kind of thing will be actually dragged down to the society. But we need to see that the instability is actually doesn't really exist in the very first place. Why so? Because we need to see that the instability of it is actually very stable, because a lot of people are actually trying to see that the world of the AI itself and they are in the very first place. We need to say that in our case, but the world of AI, the real world of the AI will be likely much more likely manifested, because the usage of the AI will be much more niche and much more segmented to the idea of they will actually know how to use the AI and not just making certain kind of general ideas of or algorithm will actually work. This is the kind of characterization that is actually coming from the four they are actually the one who only try to generalize to try to develop generalized AI in the very first place. So in the end, the idea on how we're gonna quote unquote try to and implement AI in the idea of segmented market or maybe medical or military ideas will be likely much happen in our case. So the idea of bubble and the world of the real world of the AI itself will be likely manifest in our case. Second of all, under the idea of the OO itself, OO are the only team that are trying to argue under the innovation, but they actually never actually see the whole innovation in the case of how this is actually manifested in how the reality check on how this kind of thing is actually happening. Under the characterization that already given by my member, it is pretty clear that the innovation would be happening under the case of when this kind of smaller company are being acquisition by this kind of big companies. Why so? Because in the end of the day, they are a big companies and they are being synthesized under the idea of capitalism. Why this kind of thing is important? First, this investor only care about the profit. They don't actually care about the idea of innovating and actually trying to opt out to the certain kind of niche market and the idea of how they actually gonna see on how use the whole AI in the very first place. So what's actually gonna be happening is that later they will be less likely to do certain kind of innovation, because the fear of the failure that is coming from the investor. Investor wouldn't want to do certain kind of very risky thing or something that is very niche, because the profit margin will be less likely to be happening in the very first place. The idea of they have such a big fund, that's coming, there's our stated by OO wouldn't be even matter, because the big fund would only go to the investor, not come to the developers. So CG here is the only team actually trying to see this motion from the perspective of how the market of the AI itself is actually being presented in the current status quo, and how this kind of startup is actually the one who actually push the whole core of the market on how the development of the innovation of the AI.
Innovation has been fueled by capitalism for far too long. At the very least, we still have the driven form of innovations. Under your side, how innovations will happen? Because AI is expensive, it needs response, it needs people. Company can provide this. How's your side?
In the end of the day, we need to see the characterization on how these investors are actually trying to see. These investors only care about this kind of data that will actually see the profit margin of the company and how likely this kind of thing will be happening, and this kind of thing will be actually profitable for the whole investor. In the end of the day, they wouldn't even care about the innovation, because the whole core of the current modern capitalism is how they gonna increase as much margin as possible while also doing less as much as possible. That is the current situation of the capitalism society that is actually being hindering the whole core of the development of the AI. CG here is very clear. We want the proliferation of the AI market, not only because of the competition, but we need to see on how this kind of startup are actually being set up in the very first place. They are the geek who actually want to try to do something and try to quote unquote play with the AI in the very first place. This kind of characterization is important because they are the enthusiasts. They are actually the one who actually gonna try to push the AI to the most niche market, while also trying to serve certain kind of ideal market or certain kind of niche usage of the AI. This is the kind of thing that we are seeing. That's why the usage of the much more specialist AI is actually becoming increasing day by day, because they are realizing that the ChatGPT, this DeepSeek or major AI are not really that reliable to do certain kind of much more segmented seek. This kind of people are already realizing that this kind of the world of the AI is actually much more gonna be manifested in more clearly under the case of our case. OG are coming into this debate fair with the ideas on how this kind of thing will be hinder the idea of data breach. But in the end of the day, the manifestation of data breach will be much more likely in our case in the very first place, because the idea of characterization on how this kind of big companies are actually being quote unquote evil under the idea of data breach will be much more mechanized in our case. So the whole core of the evil big corporation the data breach and the environmental destruction will only be mechanized under the setup that is already proven by my member. So it's pretty clear that the CG is actually the only stream that trying to see this motion from the much more nuance on how this market is actually working and the technological development of the AI. We are here concerned about the development of AI that is actually being much more centralized under the idea of much more general use AI, while also the demand of the market is actually pretty clear. They want to use AI for much better use of the much more segmented usage of the AI. This is the kind of thing that is also being worried by the CEO, that they are saying that the people they don't actually know the work of the AI. But this kind of the mechanization and the characterization that being brought by my member is actually the biggest contribution that is coming from the CG in the very first place, because we are actually trying to see this kind of thing from the perspective on how this technology are being developed and the uniqueness of the AI and this exclusive market of the AI actually being used, and also the perspective of the startup on how they actually gonna do development, and also from the perspective of the user itself, because the user are actually also the one who catalyze the whole usage of the AI in the very first place. No one gonna make AI if no one gonna be able to use it, or no one gonna use it in the very first place. So we here is pretty clear. We want the much better innovation under the AI in which that will be much more likely to be happening in our case, because we are actually the only team that actually give you the much more nuance under the idea on how this market are working, the demand of the people, and how the corporation are actually hinder the whole development of the AI. Proud to propose.
All right, thank you for that speech. To close the entire debate, let's welcome Opposition Whip.
Yeah, can I be heard? Yeah. I don't understand the accusation coming from OG, because OO was explaining why it is here to regulate under opposition, which is not mutually exclusive with our idea that it will be very hard to regulate under government. What does this mean? I think what we're trying to say is that even if it's actually hard to regulate, we are able to mechanize the benefit of rationale of why they're not actually trying to regulate the AI itself. What does this mean? I think we mechanize the explanation coming from opening opposition on how to actually manage the bubble, or to make sure that incentive to make the economic shift actually exists. I think this already makes us over opening opposition. But next, I'm going to tackle on OG. I think three things that I'll answer on this one. I think one, intelligent innovation and competitiveness. I think let's say that the most important thing that is dismissed by both government branch is that this is an oligopoly market model. That means monopoly are partially untrue or only true. Because this is the context that there are not one but four big companies that becomes the main player in the market. The characteristic entails that one, I think you are in an equal situation that forces you to maintain your relevance through competition. Hence, I do not think that the big four will suddenly stagnant due to high interest and demand of AI. They'll be burning their capital to make sure and hire more developers in order to do this to make sure they're relevant in the competition. This tackle the concept of innovation and competition because it's significantly untrue, but the additional framing that you can credit is that the fact that competitiveness also creates jobs along the way of acquisition rather than you let the small companies compete with the Goliath of the market. This means that they have never to establish to you, and so far they cannot answer why they can compete of their small company innovation. They cannot win this debate. But let's take their best case, even why the lack of innovation happened because of the lack of innovation by small companies. Let's say the case of Silicon Valley. Three things. One, until now, I still don't understand how the good innovation from small companies are actually going to be. I will posit to you that the fact that they don't have any investor in the first place, that that backs on them, is probably because their innovation is not relevant to the current situation. We see the tech company try to make a specific algorithm to search a specific music genre on the music app or trying to seek like friends in sports community, which is not actually better than a Facebook community anyway. I think this means that they don't have an actual relevance. Therefore, that's why they don't have any inventor in the first place. We question the value of the small company innovation. But second, even if they're good, they'll have a concern on sustainability that because like, the demand from the clients in concerns of upgrades on maintenance because exactly they like HR and capital to do so. Hence, they cannot sustain their business anyway. I do not get why it's going to be good on their side. But thirdly, flip, say that this is the identification of relevance that exists because the company acquisition. Because it means that company actually have value. That is a good ROI also for company. We got like more experts to acknowledge what the valuation of the company of the code that they want to acquisition. This is how we can get a better innovation, right? This is how we mechanize also on innovation. Why it's going to be better on our side. We break the deadlock on incentive to innovate in the end of the day. But let's weigh this. I think you see that in the correct way to this is correct way to uplift a small company that innovation that is done right by company acquisition. This ends up to be a better accessibility because you don't need to sell your model really high for ROI. Instead, you can sell them for a competing price on the market. And we mechanize on how small company can actually give their value maximally. But secondly, on a little bit of data infringement, two things. One, I don't get on scale wise. It's still unsure on why acquiring small data is going to be matter that much. In comparing these data, probably also already the people that use the open AI or like Microsoft data, also the people that probably is going to be really niche. Therefore, we question the significance. But second, even if that's not the case, OG is still uncharitable because infringement is metric as if their stance is to oppose the acquisition, not broke up the companies. Therefore, this is a insignificant matter if we want to point that why it's going to be relevant. I think then, why then in the end of the day, I want to solve on a comparative. Three things. One, this is currently until now, every government branch is dismissive. On the current thing that on the economic tech and economic trend, we need to acknowledge that countries are mostly on investing on AI stocks, especially on the big four that becomes a blue chip for them. We say the moment this is acquisition is opposed, it's the moment that the innovation probably drops on their side because the stock valuation is going to be fall down the drain. What does this mean? And the government branch action is going to be really hard to make sure they can be a good government to prevent the stock bubble or anything. Because you need because the action that is on their side by opposing this is encouraging a bubble pop to make sure that it's so hard for the economy to recover. And the comparative that is on our side that we are able to save that bubble to make sure that economic recession doesn't happen. Because we already acknowledge the precedent of 2008 housing. That is really horrible, right? We don't want this to happen anymore. We'll take one on one.
The purpose of having smaller market share is to keep that bubble stable instead of allocating every bet on a few companies. The stronger they grow, the unlikely you can control them. AI bubble does not pop up in OG because when the investment is directed to other companies, investor trust on AI companies change. But for the same sector, it remains the same because you're allocating to same sector.
Investor maybe have the information to do that, but there are still people who invest on that. Therefore, I claim on recession is still going to be make sense because like there are people who still because like they are already being capitalized by companies to think that it is actually something that worth it to invest there. I think the way over the OG is that we already rationalize to you what is the actual incentive why we do not want to push it. Is the existence of bubble that is damning for everyone. I think this is a bigger margin of delta that you need to credit. But seconding to CG, I think the problem within CG is one important thing about innovation that we already tackled, but also on the image problem. We want to say two things on this one. One, I think that it's untrue that it is hard to save company image the moment company has done like something wrong. Because judge the meaning of acquisition is that like Big Four will buy out their stock to become a majority of stockholder. Meaning that if something bad happens, they can simply pull out of their investment to make sure they can minimize the harm. But also, if we want to talk about PR manager, you can just say that we are currently not supporting the company anymore. We are not advertising with them. That's already the end. But second, even if they want to do shady business anyway, I don't think they are going to be good way of doing this. They can just rebrand themselves like putting like subsidiary company that is probably small acknowledgement to do that. This means that there's no such thing as like image problem in the end of the day. But I think that it becomes important on how CG we win against CG, and so far that they cannot prove why innovation can happen better on their side. I think we already proved that why innovation can happen cheaper or even more in much more rational situation on closing opposition. But like the 200, I think we won in four things. One, I think we established the nuance of the debate. And so far that we are the one who characterize what is the current situation on econ and tech market, I think we make sure that we can upper them on that. Second, it also tackles a relevant from governments that has never been answered. And so far we characterize on what the market looks like, on what the innovation, but lastly, we broke the deadlock between like innovation and we mechanize the benefit. Thank you for the debate.
All right, thank you very much for the debate, and that marks the end for the second round for NUDC. For all of the debaters, please do shake hands, cross floors, and please do wait outside while the judges deliberate.